What if I told you that a man dug a tunnel for 3 years straight, with his bare hands, broke through the floor at 3 a.m., looked around, and realized he'd just broken into a clothing store? Or that a lottery winner blew $27 million, went completely broke, and then had the absolute nerve to sue the lottery for not warning him? These are not cartoons, these are not movies. These are real breathing humans who looked at life, had a choice, and chose chaos. And we have 49 of them lined up for you today. If you think you've made bad decisions, just wait, because by number 7, you're going to feel like an absolute genius. Smash that subscribe button, drop a comment with the dumbest thing you've ever done, and hit like so more people can feel better about their life choices. Let's go. 1. A man in Florida sued himself after causing a car accident. He was also the city employee driving the government vehicle that hit him. The whole situation was so confusing that even the judge had to take a moment. Nobody in that courtroom could keep a straight face. He represented both sides of the argument at the same time. His lawyer had never seen anything like it in 30 years of practice. The court somehow still made a decision. He won $900 against himself. He celebrated. Then remembered he also had to pay it. That man went home both a winner and a loser on the exact same day. 2. A burglar in Ohio broke into a house one quiet evening and immediately got hungry. Instead of grabbing valuables and leaving like a normal criminal, he decided to cook a full meal in the kitchen. He put everything on the stove, sat down on the couch, and waited for the food to finish. At some point, his eyes got heavy. The warm smell of a home-cooked meal did him in completely. Officers arrived to find him sound asleep on the sofa, snoring, still wearing an apron he had found hanging near the fridge. Police had to wake him up twice before he understood what was happening. 3. A woman in Texas drove to a gas station and told everyone her car simply refused to start. She asked strangers for help, with a very serious expression on her face. A kind mechanic walked over and asked her to show him exactly what she had been doing. She pulled out a TV remote, not her keys. A television remote control. She had been pointing it at the steering column for 45 minutes, pressing buttons and wondering why nothing was happening. The mechanic stood completely still for several seconds. He had no words. She genuinely could not understand why everyone around her suddenly looked so tired. 4. A man in Germany walked into a bank with a water pistol, painted black, and demanded money. The teller looked at it carefully, then looked at him, and laughed out loud right in his face. Instead of running, the man got offended. He asked to speak with the manager about the teller's unprofessional behavior. The manager came out, also tried not to laugh. The man stood at the counter explaining his complaint in full detail. He was very serious about the whole thing. He was still standing there fixing his case when police walked through the front door. He'd been waiting so long he forgot he was robbing a bank. 5. 2 brothers in Arkansas sat down one evening and made what they both believed was a very smart financial decision. They took their entire $600 rent money and decided to bet it against each other on a single coin flip. One called heads, one called tails. The coin went up, somebody won. Then both of them stood there in complete silence. Neither one had stopped to think that whoever won that money still had to use it to pay the same rent they shared. They had been living in the same apartment the entire time. Their landlord found out and told the story for years. 6. A man smuggled a live crocodile onto a passenger plane by hiding it inside his duffel bag. For a while, everything seemed fine. Then the crocodile escaped somewhere over open sky. Passengers saw it. Screaming started immediately. People rushed to one side of the cabin all at once. The weight shift was too much. The small plane tilted and went down. It crashed and killed 19 of the 20 people on board. The man with the bag survived. He then had to stand in an actual courtroom and explain his full thought process to a judge. The crocodile also did not make it. Nobody won that day. 7. A woman picked up her phone and dialed 911 with the energy of someone reporting a national disaster. McDonald's had run out of chicken McNuggets. She told the operator this was completely unacceptable and needed to be treated as the emergency it clearly was. The operator calmly explained that this did not qualify as an emergency. The woman hung up. then called back. The operator explained again. She hung up again, then called a third time to make absolutely sure they understood the seriousness of what had happened. She was not angry, she was genuinely concerned. Officers showed up at McDonald's. There were no McNuggets. Nobody could argue with that part. 8. A prisoner in Sweden pulled off a fairly impressive escape from jail. He got out, made it to a nearby lake, found an unattended boat and took it without hesitation. For a moment he was completely free and moving fast across the water. Then the boat stopped. He looked around. He had drifted onto a small island with nothing on it. No food, no shelter. The temperature started dropping. He sat there for a while thinking through his options. Then he pulled out a phone and called the police himself. He told them he was cold and very hungry and would like to be collected. Officers arrived and brought him back without much effort. 9. A man in England decided the cleanest solution to his marriage problems was to hire someone to make them permanently disappear. He found what he believed was a professional hitman and felt very good about the whole arrangement. What he did not know was that the hitman was actually his wife's divorce attorney doing a personal favor for a police officer friend. They set up a lunch meeting to discuss the details. The man showed up, ordered food, and confessed absolutely everything in full professional detail, thinking he was being discreet. He even left a tip. Officers were waiting outside before the bill arrived. He had walked himself directly into a trap over a business meal. 10. A man in South Korea spotted a speed camera flash behind him and immediately came up with what he believed was a brilliant plan. He pulled up next to the car directly in front of him at the very next red light, quietly got out, swapped his license plate with that car's plate, got back in. Felt very pleased with himself. The car he had just stolen a plate from was an unmarked police vehicle. The officers inside had watched the entire thing happen from their front seats. They did not even need to run the plates. They simply got out and introduced themselves. He had no follow-up plan prepared for that moment. 11. A thief snatched a wallet from someone's pocket and felt very good about his work. He flipped through it looking for cash and found a coupon tucked inside for a free sandwich at a nearby restaurant. He decided to use it immediately. He walked in, handed it over. The man behind the counter stared at the coupon for a long moment, then stared at the wallet in the thief's hand, then stared at his own face on the loyalty card inside it. He was the store owner. He had been robbed exactly 1 hour before this moment. The thief had walked directly back to the victim to collect his free sandwich without a single concern in the world. 12. A man decided the smartest way to pass his driving test was to hide a tiny earpiece in his ear and have someone outside feed him all the answers in real time. He sat down feeling completely prepared. The questions started coming. His outside helper started answering. Every single answer was wrong, not occasionally wrong, consistently and confidently wrong on every question from start to finish. The examiner grew more concerned with each response. The man failed with one of the lowest scores the test center had ever recorded. When investigators looked into it, they discovered his outside helper had never passed a driving test either. 2 people failed that day, and only 1 was in the room. 13. A couple in New Zealand came up with what they believed was a deeply clever idea to find out who truly cared about their relationship. And they quietly started a fake rumor that their wedding was canceled just to see who would still show up on the day. They told nobody the truth. The actual wedding day arrived, they got dressed, they went to the venue. Nobody came. Not a single guest. Not the bridesmaids, not the groomsmen, not even the caterer, who had a legally binding contract. The couple stood in an empty, decorated hall looking at each other. The wedding never officially happened. They had outsmarted themselves completely and had the flowers to prove it. 14. A man in Japan grew so tired of working alone in silence that he paid a company a monthly fee to send someone to sit near him while he worked. That person's only job was to exist nearby and say nothing. For a while, this seemed to help. Then the man decided the quality of the nothing was simply not good enough. He filed a formal written consumer complaint, stating that the service had failed to meet a satisfactory standard of doing nothing. The company received the complaint, read it carefully, and had absolutely no idea how to respond to it. Somewhere, a customer service representative stared at that letter for a very long time. 15. A man in Indiana walked into a pharmacy and robbed it with full confidence. He was wearing his uniform from his actual day job. Same shirt, same name badge, first name, last name, employer logo, all of it clearly visible the entire time. He went home, slept, got up the next morning, put on the same shirt again, drove to work, walked through the front door, and found police already standing inside waiting for him with his full employment file on the table. He stopped in the doorway and looked genuinely confused about how they had tracked him down so quickly. The investigation had taken officers approximately 4 minutes from start to finish. 16. A woman decided her ex deserved to find his car destroyed as an act of personal justice. She found it parked on the street, poured accelerant on it, set it on fire, walked away feeling completely satisfied. 1 block later, something felt wrong. She turned around and looked back carefully. It was the wrong car. A total stranger's vehicle was now fully on fire. She made the decision to go back and find the correct one. She located it, and police were already on the scene from the first fire. They watched her approach a second car with the same materials. She was arrested within seconds of arriving. She had returned to a crime scene to commit the same crime twice. 17. A group of men in Russia came up with what seemed like a very profitable plan. They backed a truck up to an ATM machine in broad daylight, pulled it completely off the wall, loaded it in, drove it home, and spent the next 2 full days trying everything they could think of to crack it open. Nothing worked. The machine was built to survive exactly this situation. Eventually, they made a phone call to a locksmith, explained what they needed without explaining why. The locksmith arrived, looked at the ATM sitting in the middle of a private home, asked no follow-up questions, finished the call, and reported them to police before he had even left the driveway. 18. A man sat in his living room and asked his Google Home device to help him plan a robbery out loud. And he went through the full details: location, timing, entry points, everything spoken clearly into the air. What he did not know was that his neighbor's Alexa device was picking up the entire conversation through a very thin shared wall. The neighbor's device processed what it heard, contacted emergency services on its own, and officers were dispatched before the man had even finished making his plan. He opened his front door the next morning feeling ready. Police were already on the porch. 2 smart home devices had worked together to end his criminal career before it started. 19. A con artist in 1900s. New York discovered that people would believe almost anything if you said it with enough confidence. He began selling the Brooklyn Bridge to tourists who had just arrived in the city and had no idea how anything worked. He did not do this once or twice. He reportedly sold that bridge over 100 times to completely different buyers. Each one handed over real money for a bridge they could not own. The truly remarkable part was what some of them did next. Several buyers actually showed up at the bridge with wood and tools, ready to begin building their own personal toll booths on it. Nobody stopped to ask a single follow-up question. 20. A woman sat down and wrote one of the most passionate and detailed negative reviews anyone had ever posted about a restaurant. The food was disgusting. The experience was ruined. She would never return under any circumstances. She published it publicly for everyone to read. The restaurant owner read it carefully, then opened the customer database. Then replied publicly underneath her review with her complete personal order, history pulled directly from their system. 57 separate takeout orders placed over 14 months. The most recent one just 3 days before the review. The entire internet saw both posts at the same time. She never responded to the owner's reply. The review is still up. So is the order history. 21. A man in Australia decided he deserved a large insurance payout and came up with what he considered a very convincing plan. He would fake a shark attack. He filled out the claim form in detail. described the incident with impressive commitment, then attached supporting evidence to make the whole thing feel official. The photo he included was taken in his backyard swimming pool, a completely visible above-ground pool with a plastic toy shark floating near the steps. The insurance investigator opened the envelope, looked at the photo for a long time, then looked at it again. The man had submitted a photograph of his own garden as evidence of a dangerous ocean encounter. The claim was denied within the hour. 22. A guy thought it would be absolutely hilarious to duct tape himself to an airplane seat at 30,000 feet in front of a full cabin of passengers. Everyone laughed at first. Then he decided the joke had run its course and it was time to get free. He pulled. Nothing moved. He pulled harder. Still nothing. He asked a flight attendant for help. She assessed the situation carefully and informed him that because he had restrained himself to an aircraft seat mid-flight, it had now been classified as an active in-flight security situation. Regulations required it stay that way until landing. He sat taped to that seat for 2 more hours. The plane landed. He was escorted off first by several people. 23. A lottery winner received $27 million and immediately felt that the best thing to do was spend it as fast as possible. Cars, properties, parties, gifts for strangers. Everything went quickly and with great enthusiasm. Within 2 years, every dollar was completely gone. He filed for bankruptcy shortly after, then did something that shocked even his own lawyer. He sued the Lottery Commission directly. His argument was that they had a moral and ethical obligation to warn him ahead of time that suddenly receiving $27 million had the potential to negatively affect his lifestyle. The judge listened to the full argument. The case was dismissed. The man left the courtroom with no money and no warning label. 24. The couple lived directly next door to each other for 14 full years without ever having a real conversation. They passed in the hallway, nodded occasionally, nothing more. Then one evening they both downloaded a dating app and the algorithm matched them together immediately. They met for coffee, fell in love, got married. Their families thought it was the most romantic story they had ever heard. Then 2 years into the marriage, things fell apart completely. The divorce proceedings became one of the most complicated cases their lawyer had ever handled. The central legal dispute was over who legally owned the shared wall between their 2 original apartments. They had gone from strangers to neighbors to lovers to enemies over one wall. 25. A man in Norway spotted police behind him and made the instant decision to steal a nearby car and drive away as fast as he could. He got in, started it, pulled out with great urgency. 3 blocks away, he drove directly through a sobriety checkpoint that was set up and fully staffed on the main road. Officers waved him down. He stopped. They approached the window. He had not been drinking at all. He was completely sober. The only problem he had in the entire world at that moment was that he had never actually learned how to drive a car properly. And he'd been swerving the entire 3 blocks. Police had 2 separate reasons to arrest him before he had even reached the checkpoint. 26. A man got tired of losing his lunch at work every single day. Food would go into the office fridge. Food would disappear overnight. He decided enough was enough. He installed a small hidden camera pointed directly at the fridge and went home feeling like a detective. The footage came back clear and detailed. Every night a figure walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, took out his food, ate it standing at the counter, then walked back to bed. The figure was him. He had been sleepwalking into the kitchen every single night, eating his own carefully packed lunch in a completely unconscious state, then returning to sleep with no memory of any of it. There he had been investigating himself for 2 weeks. 27. A woman needed to move $50,000 in cash and decided the safest and most practical method was to hide it inside a birthday cake and mail it through standard postal service. She packaged everything carefully, walked to the post office, filled out the customs form, listed the contents honestly as birthday cake, handed it over the counter, and went home. Customs flagged the package almost immediately, not because of the money, because a birthday cake had arrived at the facility weighing 14 pounds. Officers opened it, found the cash layered between the sponge and frosting in neat stacks. She received a phone call shortly after. It was not a birthday greeting. The cake did not make it to the party. 28. And a man looked his friend directly in the eyes and made a very confident bet. He could eat 50 hard-boiled eggs in under 1 hour. His friend accepted immediately. The clock started. The eggs went down one after another with alarming commitment. He finished. He won. He stood up from the table feeling victorious. Then his body made several very strong objections all at once. The medical bills that followed were 3 times larger than the total prize money he had won from the bet. He decided this was his friend's fault. He hired a lawyer, filed a formal lawsuit claiming the stress of the eating challenge had caused his medical situation. The judge asked him to confirm that he had voluntarily eaten 50 eggs. He confirmed this. The case did not go well. 29. EA CEO gathered his entire company on a Zoom call on New Year's Day and fired every single employee at once. He then opened LinkedIn and posted a long message about bold leadership and the courage it takes to cut dead weight from an organization. He used several motivational phrases, added a professional headshot. The post went live immediately. His company had 3 clients in total. One of those clients saw the post within the hour. They read it carefully, then sent a very short email canceling their contract effective immediately. The CEO had announced his own instability to the entire professional internet on a public holiday and lost 33% of his revenue before lunchtime on the first day of the new year. 30. A man in South America became completely convinced that a bank vault was sitting directly beneath a nearby building. He bought tools, made a plan, and spent 3 full years digging a tunnel by hand through soil and concrete, moving toward what he was certain was a fortune. He finally broke through the floor one night and climbed up into the space above. He was inside a clothing store at 3 in the morning. No vault, no cash, just folded shirts and a display of belts. He spent 4 hours walking through every section of that store, looking behind shelves and inside fitting rooms, genuinely searching for the money. He eventually gave up, climbed back down, and went home through the tunnel he had spent 3 years building. 31. A guy in Spain got pulled over by a traffic officer and immediately decided that the smoothest solution was a bribe. He took a €50 note, tucked it neatly inside his driver's license, and handed the whole thing over with the calm confidence of someone who had done this before. The officer looked at the license, then at the money, then back at the man. He was wearing a body camera on his chest, fully visible, recording everything in high definition. The man looked at the camera, asked quietly if it was currently switched on. The officer confirmed that yes, it was on and had been recording the entire time. The man thought about this for a moment, then asked if he could please have his €50 back. 32. A woman in Canada walked into a grocery store feeling particularly confident that day. She moved through the aisles, unselected several items, and walked out without paying for any of them. Security stopped her immediately at the exit. They brought her to the back office and asked her to explain herself. She sat down. They looked at what she was wearing. Across the front of her shirt, in large, clear letters, were the words, "I did it." She explained that it was her lucky shirt. She wore it specifically on days when she felt especially bold and self-assured. She had chosen it that morning because she needed confidence for exactly this errand. The security team wrote that detail into their official report word for word. 33. A man in the Philippines stood before his entire village one afternoon and announced that he possessed genuine magical powers. He had the ability to walk directly through solid walls. The crowd gathered with great interest. He pointed at a thick concrete barrier standing in the center of the square. He rolled up his sleeves. He took several deep, focused breaths. The crowd went completely silent. Then he ran at the wall with full speed and every bit of commitment his body could produce. He hit it directly, in front of 30 witnesses. He could not walk through walls under honor ice. He had never been able to walk through walls. He recovered slowly on the ground while the crowd stood around him, reconsidering everything he had ever told them. 34. A university student in his second year decided that the fire alarm was his best available option for getting out of a final exam he had not prepared for. He walked to the nearest alarm, pulled it, felt immediate relief. The building evacuated completely. Then he remembered something important. His exam was not in this building. It was in the building directly next door, which had not been affected by the alarm at all. His exam continued on schedule while fire investigators arrived and began questioning everyone about who had pulled the alarm. He had to walk into his exam late, sit down in front of his unprepared paper, and complete it with 3 fire investigators standing at the back of the room, watching him specifically for the entire duration. 35. A man in Sweden showed up to a hot dog eating contest at a local summer fair with serious intentions. The whistle blew. He ate with remarkable focus and zero hesitation. 38 hot dogs disappeared in the allotted time. He finished first, claimed his trophy, and was presented with his prize, which was a full year's supply of hot dogs delivered monthly to his front door. He accepted it graciously, then went home and spent the next several days unable to look at a hot dog without feeling deeply unsettled. The deliveries kept arriving every month regardless. He contacted a lawyer, filed a formal lawsuit against the fair organizers, claiming the prize had caused him genuine and measurable suffering. The judge asked how many he had eaten voluntarily. He said 38. The judge moved on. 36. A couple in Ireland sat down with their neighbor one evening over tea and came away feeling like the luckiest people in the entire country. He had told them about an investment opportunity, a guaranteed gold mine. Returns were certain. The future was bright. They took out a massive loan the very next week and handed over every penny with complete trust. Then, they went to see the investment in person. It was a field, an actual empty field in the countryside, with one goat standing in the middle of it, looking at them. They asked the neighbor where the gold mine was. He pointed at the field. They looked at the goat. The goat looked back. The neighbor kept the goat. It was the only thing in the investment that had any real value. 37. A man in Greece had been claiming a government disability benefit for years and decided it was finally time to make everything official with a proper medical evaluation. He arrived at the clinic, was brought into the examination room. The doctor introduced himself and extended a hand. The man stood up from his wheelchair, reached out, and shook it firmly with a wide smile before his brain caught up with what his body had just done. The room went completely silent. The doctor looked at the handshake, then at the empty wheelchair, then back at the handshake. The man slowly processed the situation he had just created for himself in real time. He attempted to lower himself back down casually. The doctor picked up his pen and began writing very detailed notes. 38. A woman in Mexico decided her dog deserved a proper birthday celebration and began planning with the kind of energy most people reserve for weddings. 200 invitations went out. A venue was booked. A professional photographer was hired and briefed on the schedule for the day. The guests arrived. All 200 of them were dogs. And the photographer spent the entire event chasing animals who had no interest in posing and every interest in eating the decorations. Afterward, the woman sat down and wrote a detailed Yelp review. She gave 1 star. Her complaint was specific. The photographer had clearly demonstrated a complete inability to connect with and properly work alongside her guests. She felt this should have been disclosed up front as a professional limitation. 39. A man in Poland decided his apartment needed to be sold and moved forward with the entire process without mentioning it to one important person, his wife, who was still living there. He found a buyer, negotiated a price, accepted a deposit, and spent that money before his wife discovered any part of what was happening. She found out when a stranger knocked on the door to discuss moving in dates. The wife stood in the doorway completely confused. The buyer stood outside equally confused. The man was located shortly after and asked to explain himself to several different people, including a judge. His explanation was that he had intended it as a surprise. Nobody in the room accepted this as a reasonable answer. 40. A man in Argentina needed to leave the country without going through any official channels and came up with what he considered an elegant solution. He built a wooden crate, climbed inside, labeled it furniture, and arranged for it to be shipped across the border as standard freight. The crate was loaded, transported, and placed inside a customs facility for standard processing. Somewhere in the middle of this journey, he realized he had not brought any water with him into the crate. Time passed. The situation became uncomfortable, then urgent. He began knocking on the inside of the box from within the customs building, then knocked harder, then called out, asking to be let out, please. Officers opened the crate, found a man inside, surrounded by no furniture whatsoever. He was immediately taken into custody and given some water, 41. A guy in Portugal made a decision at 18 that would define the next 4 years of his life. He was going to become a lawyer. He studied every day with complete dedication. He sat every exam. He passed every module. He graduated with a full law degree and felt ready to take on the world. And then life handed him a personal legal dispute, and he decided to represent himself in court. After all, he had the qualifications. The case proceeded. His arguments were presented. The opposing counsel responded. The judge listened to everything carefully. Then the judge leaned forward and stated on the official court record that it was one of the worst legal arguments he had witnessed in that courtroom in his entire career. The man had a framed degree at home that disagreed. 42. A woman in Denmark bought a sweater for $22 and wore it a few times before deciding it simply was not right for her. She returned to the store and asked for a full refund. The store said no. The sweater was 11 years old. She disagreed with this position strongly. She escalated to the store's corporate office. They also said no. She escalated further to a formal consumer tribunal and hired legal representation to make her case as strong as possible. The tribunal process ran its full course over several months. By the time a final decision was reached, she had spent an estimated $3,000 in legal fees fighting for her $22 sweater. The tribunal ruled against her. She reportedly considered appealing. 43. A man in Japan heard about a competition that sounded like the perfect opportunity. Eat ramen every single day for 30 consecutive days and win a lifetime supply of the thing you had just spent a month eating constantly. He signed up without hesitation. He showed up every day. He finished every bowl. On day 30, he was declared the winner and received his lifetime supply as promised with a ceremony and applause. Then he made his next decision. He would open a ramen restaurant and share his passion with the community. The restaurant opened. Customers came daily. He stood behind the counter every service. Preparing and serving bowl after bowl of ramen, he could no longer bring himself to eat. Business was good. His relationship with noodles was not. 44. A couple in the United States had been working toward one goal for years, getting completely out of debt. Every sacrifice had been made. Every extra dollar had gone toward the balance. Then finally the last payment cleared, and they were free. They looked at each other and agreed this moment deserved a real celebration. A big one. A party with guests and food and decorations and everything a debt-free life represented. They planned it all out with great excitement. Then they paid for the entire party using a credit card because they had spent every single dollar they owned paying off the debt. They stood at their own celebration surrounded by friends and a brand new balance sitting quietly on a card in a wallet on the table. 45. A man in Hungary was sitting in a courtroom trying to convince a judge that he had been nowhere near a crime scene at the time in question. He had evidence. A photograph of himself taken at the exact moment the crime occurred, clearly showing him in a completely different location. He handed it over, feeling very confident. The judge examined the photo carefully, then examined it again, then turned it around and showed it to the courtroom. Visible in the background of the photograph behind the man's smiling face was the crime scene itself, every detail of it, captured clearly in his own alibi photo. He had submitted a picture that placed him somewhere else, while simultaneously showing exactly where that somewhere else was. The judge had no further questions. 46. A woman in the Netherlands noticed one afternoon that her neighbor's garden fence was 6 centimeters further onto her property than it was legally allowed to be. 6 centimeters. She spoke to the neighbor. The neighbor disagreed. She hired a lawyer. The neighbor hired a lawyer. The case entered the legal system, and both parties committed fully to seeing it through to the end. Years passed. More hearings, more fees, more paperwork over 6 centimeters of land that neither of them could use for anything meaningful in the first place. By the time the court issued its final ruling, the combined legal costs paid by both neighbors had exceeded the total market value of the entire property the fence was standing on. The fence was moved. Nobody felt good about it. 47. A man in Turkey signed up for a competition that suited his personality perfectly. The Most Patient Person contest. Participants had to remain calm and still for a full 24 hours without giving up. He was extraordinary at it. Hours passed, and others dropped out one by one while he sat completely unbothered. By hour 23, he was the clear leader. Nobody else was close. 13 minutes remained between him and total victory. A lifetime of bragging rights was minutes away. Then he got bored. He stood up, stretched, and walked out of the competition with 13 minutes left on the clock. Organizers watched him leave in stunned silence. He had outlasted everyone, then outlasted himself. The runner-up was declared the winner and could not believe what had just happened. 48. A man in the United States applied for a job he genuinely wanted. The interview went well. He answered every question confidently and left feeling like he had made a strong impression. A few days later, he sat down to send a professional follow-up email to the hiring manager. He wrote it carefully, thanked them for their time, then added one final request at the bottom, asking them to please keep his application completely confidential and not mention any of this to his current employer. He attached his resume, hit send, then noticed something. He had accidentally added his current boss to the CC field of the email. His boss received it within seconds, read the whole thing, including the part asking for confidentiality. He found out about the job interview the same way the hiring manager did. 49. A college student in England sat down on the very first day of the semester and received his thesis assignment. He read the title quickly, felt confident he understood it, opened his laptop and began working that same evening with impressive dedication. He researched for months. He wrote with real depth and detail. He built arguments. He added references. He formatted everything correctly. 12,000 words of carefully constructed academic work came together over an entire semester of effort. Then on the final day, he picked up the original assignment sheet to confirm the submission details. He read the title again. Slowly this time. It was a completely different topic to the one he had been writing about. He had misread it on day 1 and never once looked at it again. The submission deadline was in 4 hours. And there you have it. 49 real human beings who looked at life and said, "Hold my drink." Honestly, at this point, the real mystery is how any of these people managed to tie their shoes in the morning. If this video made you question everything you thought you knew about common sense, then you are already smarter than half the people we just talked about. Hit that like button, subscribe to BrainFumble, and turn on notifications so you never miss another beautiful disaster. Share this with that one friend who needs a confidence boost. Now tell us in the comments, which one of these 49 legends do you think deserved their own reality show?